Bismillahi walhamdulillahi wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. In this session, we continue with the chapter sensing that there's something wrong in the relationship. We're at the end of the chapter, and in this part, we're dealing with the issue of can a relationship be restored after there's infidelity. I want to talk about infidelity indirectly. I don't want to go into the types of infidelity because someone had asked personally, what do I think about the issue of emotional cheating and so on and so forth. And the reason why I don't want to go into the details of the different types of infidelity is because for a person that encounters that there was emotional cheating, so to speak, by that definition, in a relationship, and it affects them as though the partner had committed the physical act of cheating itself, like actually engaging another partner and being a person that is not loyal in the relationship or in the marriage. If a person feels as though that emotional cheating is at that level for them, it's very difficult to convince them otherwise, right? We can have conversations about why it is that those things are not equivalent, emotional cheating with the actual act of being disloyal in the sense of taking on another partner and being intimate with that partner, right? Again, and going against the commitment in the marriage. And the same thing is, it becomes the case for those people in those cultures and those places where they practice polygamy, where someone may feel that if a partner goes into polygamy and they did so without informing the first wife, or they did so with informing the first wife, then later on that they realized they couldn't handle it. The same thing, the emotional intensity of that situation for certain people may be the same thing as cheating 100%, even though there's some technicality in that. So we don't want to go into the different types of infidelity. We want to talk about, can a relationship be restored after a person discovers that there's infidelity, whether it's at the level of emotional cheating, whether it's at the level of taking on another partner legitimately, whether it's at the level of illegitimately taking on another partner. The author doesn't go into all of those details, of course. A person would have to look at what she's trying to say, Rachel Chapman, in this chapter, and then try to apply it to their situation, whatever that situation may be. She is of the opinion that it's possible to go back into a relationship under certain conditions, that there's some sort of love there for the person, that there's a sense that there's some change that's there and things can be worked out. As we mentioned before, as an imam, I wouldn't tell someone to go into that situation and just be patient. That has to be a person's choice. They have to be the one that have to elect to stay in that situation and try, or really commit to working things out. Better said, versus trying. One of the things that we came up with is the issue of moving forward and the issue of setting ground rules as two fundamentals in restoring and growing the relationship. In many cases, it's better said that the relationship almost has to begin from scratch. Once there's that sense of infidelity, this idea of going back and starting from where you were may not work, because what you have done in the past as a couple is what has created the conditions for there to be infidelity. And she talks about something that may not be popular. She talks about the issue of sharing blame. That's part of moving forward. Sharing blame doesn't necessarily mean that you're justifying the fact that there's infidelity. And it doesn't mean that you haven't been violated if you're the person that was cheated on. Sharing blame means that you look at where it is that there was a breakdown in the relationship and you honestly take account and responsibility for where it is that there was breakdown. It doesn't mean that the other person is justified in doing what they did. It doesn't mean that it's right. I hope that that's understood clearly. But what it means is taking on the responsibility for where that relationship broke, right? For where that relationship broke. Now, a person, if they opt to deal with a broken relationship in the way where they go and they cheat on their spouse, they have to take responsibility for what it is that they did. They can't just say it's your fault or it's because of you that I did X, Y, and Z. Because people can be in broken relationships and not go to that level. And they can take the responsibility for what? For calling on counseling. They can take on the responsibility for talking and communicating. They can take on the responsibility for trying to identify what are the issues. That's a different approach. But once you take on the choice of, I am going to enter into another relationship, you have to take responsibility for that. Because when you enter into another relationship, you are opting to start something with someone that is not your original partner. So you can't just say that I went into that because of you, tell your partner that, your spouse, whether husband or wife. You have to take that responsibility that you initiated a new relationship, right? Whatever the grounds of that relationship, whether it's halal or haram, that has to be made clear that you did that. And if not, it's going to be impossible to be able to move forward. So moving forward, it demands certain things. And part of moving forward is having some ground rules. So let's talk about moving forward first of all. She asked the question, can you rebuild your house again? And that's why when we talk about the issue of restoring, it's probably better to say, can we build the house together from here on in? Can we build the house together from here on in? Right? Because you're going to have to learn how to deal with this relationship in a completely new way. You're going to have to deal with this relationship in a healthy way, and then you're going to have to also learn how to heal from that hurt. Because it's impossible for there to be a healthy relationship where there's communication, where there's bonding, where there's intimacy, where there's transparency, so on and so forth. And then something happens in the relationship which disrupts it at the level of infidelity. That wasn't a healthy relationship if infidelity took place. So you're going to have to learn what a healthy relationship is and then also learn how to heal. So then the issue comes up, if you can find love for your spouse, if you can live with the fact that they cheated on you for the rest of your life, if you can promise to trust them again, then the issue of forgiveness comes to the fore. So then the question of the power of forgiveness is essential to moving forward. So, but before we can do that, we have to understand that forgiveness has a cost. For the person that's asking for forgiveness and for the person that's forgiving, both partners in the relationship have to understand that forgiveness is not just the issue of saying that I'm sorry and that's it. Forgiveness is the issue of understanding that is going to take effort and work in order to be able to move forward. And in order to do that, people's pain has to be clarified. He talks about clarifying pain in this chapter. The person, she doesn't go into it with a lot of depth. I decided to pause on it. So I have 3 points that come to the issue of moving forward. Understanding the cost of forgiveness, clarifying pain, sharing blame. Okay. So I have what I call the restoration wheel, the restoration wheel, right, which is a restoration of the connection between two people so that they can build a new relationship. And under one of the points of the restoration wheel, I have the idea, of moving forward, which is fundamental. Like, okay, so how do we move forward? So I have the power of forgiveness, restoring trust, right? And how do we do that? Then I have the issue of honesty and transparency and responsibility, right? And it goes like this: power, forgiveness, restoring trust, honesty, transparency, responsibility, power, forgiveness. At the core of that wheel is the issue of empathy. If we don't have empathy for each other, then is there's the issue of forgiveness is it's not going to work. Whether you're asking for forgiveness or whether you're forgiving, the issue of having trust is not going to work if we can't be empathetic with each other. If we can't put ourselves in each other's place. The issue of honesty, the same thing. If we can't be honest with each other, empathy can't be there. And responsibility. So moving forward, right? When it comes to the issue of moving forward, we put it under the power of forgiveness. This relationship is broken. We want to move forward. There's the power of forgiveness in the restoration wheel. We're restoring connection so that we can build a new relationship. How do we begin to restore connection? We have to understand that forgiveness is not just something that is to be taken lightly. It has a cost. That cost is that we have to clarify what it is that our pain is, where it is that we've been violated, take responsibility mutually, share the blame. I need to work on this. I need to work on this in order to have a healthy relationship. Right? That's important. So moving forward is understanding the cost of forgiveness, clarifying your pain, sharing the blame. And then along with that is going to have to come other things, like, for instance, putting matters in the past. That's why if there's no behavioral change that is being initiated, it's going to be hard to move forward. Once you clarify the pain, you can't just keep bringing up what happened in the past. And that, for some people, it may be traumatic. And so that's why creating a new relationship is important, with new routines, right? Going to counseling, and that's part of the ground rules that governs moving forward. Learning intimacy, learning how to bond, learning how to let go of those memories and those feelings, learning how to be patient with each other in that process of understanding that we violated each other in multiple ways. And we are continuously calling each other to account for the pain that it is that we experienced in the past. We're not going to move anywhere, because that means that we're stuck on that reality, and we're stuck on just blaming each other versus taking responsibility and getting out of that rut and moving forward. And that's where the issue of communication and transparency comes to the fore. If we don't have communication that's solid and transparency, how is it that I can talk about my pain if there's no communication and there's no transparency? How is it that you can understand me if you're not willing to communicate with me? Communication means sharing ideas and feelings and listening and connecting and giving each other the attention that's necessary. It means moving forward to try to make the changes to modify, right, in behavior, right, and so on and so forth. And so the power of forgiveness is where we begin to move forward. Moving forward means that there has to be an understanding that forgiveness has a cost. We have to change. Forgiveness has a cost. We have to have respect, regard. We have to be understanding of the other person's pain. Now, if it's going to be a revenge thing, that, yeah, I'll accept you. I'll be here in this relationship, but I'm going to make you go through hell in the process. Might as well end the relationship, because it's going to end either way. Even if there's no divorce, there's not going to be a connection ever restored like that. So that's not worth it. If a person is going to stay to make the other person's life a living hell, then the relationship is not going to go anywhere. But you have to clarify the pain. That's part of reconciliation and truth, determination. That you have to understand where it is that you have violated someone or where you have been violated. Right? And so restoring the trust is not going to come without true change in behavior, without change in the way that we speak to each other, without a sharing of healthy emotions, right? Without transforming the thought patterns that are in our minds. We can't let go if we're constantly thinking about what happened in various ways, various forms, whether real or imagined, then it's going to be hard to get the emotions generated which can restore trust, because you're always going to be thinking about what happened, and that's going to lead to anger or fear or distrust and so on and so forth. Is going to create a situation which internally for oneself is going to be a problem, and that's going to show itself in the relationship in the way that we deal with each other. And so part of restoring trust is honesty. We have to be honest with regard to where we're at. I need time to process this. I need time to uh, calm down. You know, that's me being honest with myself. That's me being honest with my spouse, so to speak. And that's where I begin to take responsibility for how it is that I think, what's going on in my mind, how it is that I act when I feel certain things. That if I'm honest with myself, then I have the understanding that I have to make a decision. How is it that I'm going to deal with my partner in this situation? And so I always have to come back to that point that I am staying in this relationship because there's love here and I want to be in this relationship. So that's now what that means is that now I have this commitment to forgiveness, and that commitment to forgiveness means that there has to be a change that I'm initiating in the behavior, whether I was the one that caused the problem or whether I was the one that's the so-called victim, so to speak. Whoever you may be in the issue of cheating, whether you're the one that's responsible for it or you are the one that are taking on the suffering part for what was done to you. Now she says share the blame. I wouldn't say share the blame for cheating, but I would say share the blame for the breakdown of the responsibility in the relationship. You have to be responsible for the relationship broke down. But the cheating part, someone was the one that made that choice. That how I'm going to deal with this problem in my relationship is I'm going to enter into another relationship. That's why I'm very careful as to what she's saying with regard to share the blame. Because look, she's saying here, uh, okay, there was maybe a communication breakdown, or there was a loss of interest, and or you stop you really considering your partner's feelings. She says that you always made an excuse for not having sex. You know, okay, you may take responsibility for that, but does that mean you're the reason, you're the fault for your partner cheating? I can't go there with her in that one. You understand what I'm saying? I personally can't go there with her in that one. I can say that, yeah, you're responsible for a breakdown in the relationship if there's certain things that you did, but you're not responsible for a person deciding to go into another relationship. That person made that choice. Right? It's impossible for you to be the one that is responsible for that. Right? That's important to comprehend and to understand. Because once you go into another relationship, there's some sort of bonding with another person. There's some sort of verbal commitment with another person. There's some sort of marital contract. There's something, some agreement, some consent between you and another person. You can't say that you were forced to go into that new situation by your other partner. That doesn't work like that. You know what I'm saying? Also, we see sometimes in other places, in other countries, we see some scenarios where a person opts to go into a polygamous relationship. They opted, it was discussed, and then they realize they can't handle it. And then they realize that it's a situation where they feel like there's infidelity. That's a serious issue. how do you deal with that? How do you deal with those emotions? Right? That's a little more complicated because you opted to be in that type of scenario, then you realize it was too much for you to handle. Right? And so if there's no communication in dealing with that, it's not going to go anywhere. You know what I'm saying? The communication breakdown is going to mean that that relationship is done. Unless the communication corrects itself and some agreements are made as to what's needed in this relationship to sustain it. And the same thing, when we start talking about moving forward in a relationship that was damaged, injured, hurt, you know, we have to look at that restoration wheel. The power of forgiveness has to be at the key, at the core. We have to remind ourselves about that. And part of forgiving at a certain point is going to have to mean that after we make clear where we were hurt, that we don't keep bringing up the past, right? And not bringing up the past doesn't mean that we just let it go, because we have to be in agreement to work on the process of healing together. So if there's behaviors which are problematic, they have to be discussed. And even the issue of triggers, things that remind you, we can talk to those things, in other words. But you can't just keep bringing up the past like it's now, like what happened 5 years ago or yesterday or 3 years ago, that is happening now, to the point where that dominates the relationship. Right? And that's why she mentioned something that's very important. She mentioned the issue of recommitting to the relationship after there was some time to think about that. And she talks about the issue of separation. That once if there was some separation and you feel that there's love there and there's a desire to move forward, now we're in this new process of building a new relationship, as I call it. And so the power of forgiveness has to be at the fore, working on restoring trust. That means there has to be integrity between what it is that we say and what it is that we do. And we have to put an effort into it. It has to be gradual, of course, because some people want change immediately. Or they say, I'm doing this and doing that, but I'm not being appreciated. And that doesn't work like that. Just like it took time to damage the relationship, it's going to take time to build a new relationship. And that's where we have to be honest with ourselves, right? And that's part of the restoration wheel, restoring the connection. And we have to take responsibility to the fact that we committed to this new relationship, knowing that there's some baggage with it, knowing that there's damage. So we're going to take responsibility, you understand what I'm saying, for the relationship. Then we have to have communication, which is showing that we can put ourselves in each other's shoes, right? And I want to go back to this point of ground rules. Once we have an understanding of forgiveness, there's a price to pay for forgiveness. That yes, we're going to have to change. Yes, we're going to have to learn new things. Once we make clear what our pain is, once we make clear that we're going to take responsibility for building a healthy relationship, and we're sharing the blame for where it is that we failed each other, we have to restore that connection by building a healthy relationship. And that means that our communication has to be solid. That means that our intimacy and our bonding and our sharing of emotions has to be in place. That means that we may need counseling, and we have to give ourselves some time with counseling. That means that we have to introduce new routines. When there's a breakdown in the relationship, we have to realize that means that there's a breakdown in communication. There's a breakdown in intimacy. There's a breakdown in making our partners a priority. There's a breakdown in taking care of ourselves, whether our health or our physical looks. There's a breakdown in considering our partners and respecting our partners and honoring our partners. There's a breakdown in understanding what the relationship is itself and how it is to maintain the relationship. She brings up a point, and she says that men cheat because they don't feel valued or appreciated. Right? She doesn't give a reason for why women would cheat, because there's the default idea here that most of cheating is going back to men. Whether that idea is true or not, that's not a point that I'm willing to enter into right now. but I'm just going by what she said in the book, that men cheat because they don't feel valued or appreciated. And I would say, in general, when a person doesn't feel valued or appreciated in a relationship, that's generally a problem overall, right? So when we look at what breaks down a relationship, breakdowns in communications and intimacy. Intimacy uh, is the issue of emotion and physical, sexual intimacy. The issue of the person feeling that they are a priority in your life. When there's a breakdown in cooperation, uh, when there's a breakdown in us taking care of ourselves, uh, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, the way we look and our health and everything. When there's a breakdown in considering the other person, in other words, when empathy goes out the door, and empathy, we said, is at the core of the restoration wheel, restoring the connection. Empathy is needed in order to do that. It has to be at the core, because if we're not putting ourselves in the other person's place, then that means we're not going to consider them. That means that their communication is not going to come through. That means that we may not give them the priority. That means that it's going to be difficult to cooperate with them because it's all about me. That means, that I'm not considering, or respecting where the other person is. Empathy, it allows me to always pause and check my ego. It allows me to try to put myself in the other person's place. It allows me to think, you know, twice before I make certain decisions. I'm not saying self-doubt, but I'm saying that, empathy puts me in a situation where I become sensitive to my partner. And it shouldn't go overboard, the sensitivity, but it should be there in place, uh, so that we can have a healthy relationship. Now, I wanted to go to another point and close out with this. One of the main obstacles in restoring the relationship is what a person is continuously thinking, the types of emotions that they have, the types of behaviors that they demonstrate, the types of speech that they engage in, the types of feelings that they have. So their thinking, it could be thinking that's caught in the past. It could be thinking that's tied with the feeling of suspicion, and then that suspicion strengthens their thinking to the point where it's hard for them to trust. It's hard for them to think positive, and then that's where negative emotions come in, because your thinking is thrown off, and your feelings are feelings of anxiety and suspicion and so on and so forth. Then all of that impacts the way that you behave towards the other person, because your behavior is based on this thinking, which is very much not allowing you to move forward in the relationship. It's a thinking which you may be stuck on the past, or you may be constantly replaying what it is that you think took place, or what it is that you saw, or what it is that you know took place. Right. And so the emotions that you begin to have are not emotions which allow you to connect with your partner, show appreciation, show sensitivity, all of that type of thing. And so overall, I would say this: making sure that our thinking is calm and clear, making sure that our speech incorporates words which bring us together versus pushing us apart, making sure that our speech is clear as much as possible, or we seek clarity, or we give each other the chance to explain themselves, making sure that we are looking at what it is that the person is actually doing right versus what it is that they're not doing right. Right. This whole process of restoring connection, restoring, that's what I call restoring relationship. It's work, and it needs to understand what a healthy relationship is. And we started on that journey of trying to understand what a healthy relationship is by actually making the effort to reflect on the idea of a healthy relationship. And we've done that over about 9 sessions so far. So learning what healthy relationship is extremely important. But we have to remember that if our emotions, our anger, fear, a majority of the time, and if our thinking is clouded with what took place in the past, and if we, our emotions are being overcome or being driven by suspicion and anxiety, this is going to be hard to have loving compassion. It's going to be hard to have loving compassion, because loving compassion need that negative thinking is overpowered. Loving compassion demands that The words that we use are words that bring us together, not tear us apart. Words of appreciation, words of gratitude, words in which you are, you know, truthful with the other person in a non in a non judgmental way, in a way which is you're truthful, but you're not, or you're just bringing up negatives on a regular basis or just judgment so that the other person doesn't feel that they're safe with you. That we have to realize that judgment has its place, but in a broken relationship, judgment can tear everything down. You know what I'm saying? That's why we have to learn how to be honest in our communication with each other. But that doesn't mean that I just tell you whatever I want, however I want, whenever I want. That's irresponsible. We have to realize that words can hurt, and we also have to realize that a lot of times when we bring in a lack of clarity into our speech, we're showing that we're actually not committed. And so it may come from a number of different reasons. I may myself be driven by anxiety. I myself may not be committed to the idea 100%. I'm not so sure. And so I am governed by fear. And that's why a lot of my speech is unclear. So, but we have to realize that these are the things: our thinking, our emotions, our behavior, our speech, our feelings. These are the things which don't allow us to be able to move forward if we said that we want to move forward. And it's not only in a relationship in which there has been infidelity, but it's also in a relationship in which there's damage. It doesn't have to be infidelity, it could be something else that broke the relationship. It's also in a relationship that's just beginning, in which I have baggage and my partner has baggage. We have to realize that our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior, our speech, our feelings, right? And what I mean by feelings is like that vibe that you get. You know what I'm saying? What I mean by emotion is like, what is it that I'm feeling most of the time that turns into a state? You know what I'm saying? So I may be suspicious, I may be anxious, right? And so then I find myself, my main emotion that's accompanying that is either fear or anger. You know what I'm saying? So we have to look at what it is. If I'm calm, why is it that I'm not showing compassion? You know what I'm saying? We have to look at why is it that I'm having difficulty, sharing love. And that's a conversation that needs to be had with more depth. The issue of emotions, the issue of feelings, and so on and so forth. But overall, we have to realize that our behavior, the way that we act towards the person that we are saying we want to be in a relationship with, it counts. We have to realize that our speech counts. We have to realize that the types of emotions that we share counts. And we have to realize that something that's a little more hidden is our thoughts and our feelings. We have to realize that those things are going to impact us, right? And so this type of situation is a situation which in reality it needs counseling, right? It's not a situation in which you're going to be able to do this by yourself, in my opinion. Is it possible? Maybe it's possible. But when a relationship reaches this point, there needs to be counseling. There needs to be a learning of how to be in a healthy relationship when there's harm done, especially in a relationship with someone that has harmed you, right? And so that doesn't mean that you have not harmed that person, right? But we're not talking about that what it is that you have done. We're talking about the issue now of restoring a relationship, a connection, so that we can build a new life that is healthy. So if you're going to forgive that partner, that means now the issue is not to bring up every detail of where there's a problem in a relationship. That means now learning how to be in a healthy relationship. That's extremely, extremely important. Learning how to be in a healthy relationship. Because if you don't learn how to be in a healthy relationship, that means that the claim of moving forward is not going to go anywhere because you're not going to know where to go. And if you're drowning in your thoughts, your emotions, and your feelings, that means your behavior, your speech is not going to be behavior and speech which shows that reconciliation and growth is possible. It's going to be behavior and speech which all the more day by day shows that maybe it is a very bad idea to continue in this relationship because there's no change. Because there's no change. So the change begins with how we're thinking. The change begins with how it is that we deal with what it is that we're feeling. The change begins with the way that we treat the other person in our actions. The change begins with our speech. The change begins with that intention of me forgiving and me taking accountability, me working to be honest and restore the trust, me being empathetic, right? And so those things are extremely, extremely, extremely important. In closing, we want to say that moving forward, we and doing and in order to do so, we have to realize that there's a cost to forgiveness. Forgiveness demands certain things from us. We have to realize that in order for that forgiveness to really take place, we need to be understood. Both parties, the pain that we feel, the pain that we've caused, the pain that we cause to each other, the pain that we have caused one person to another person, pain that we mutually share in, and the pain that maybe I share in causing the pain that I feel, right? And sharing the blame means taking responsibility for the breakdown. I don't agree with sharing the blame for saying that I'm going to share the blame with you for infidelity because that's an individual choice. If you opted to take that route, yes, there may have been conditions of breakdown in your relationship, but that's how you chose to deal with that. So I don't think that there is wise for the idea of mutually taking responsibility for that. We could take responsibility mutually for the breakdown of the relationship, but we can't take mutual responsibility for infidelity. That doesn't work like that. That's a straight violation of the relationship. The ground rules then, in order to be able to move forward after the idea of understanding the cost of forgiveness, that work needs to be put in. That yes, you're going to experience hardship in the relationship, but you said that you want to be in it. So there's a cost to forgiveness. There's a cost to gaining forgiveness, and there's a cost to forgiving. After you clarify, the pain that you're in, both people, we said, and the damage that's caused, that's all purifying and healthy and so on and so forth. Then there's the issue of taking responsibility for how to move forward. And what are the ground rules? That there has to be behavior changes. There has to be transparency and communication so trust can be restored. There has to be a reevaluation of intimacy and how you're bonding in that relationship. There has to be a letting go of what took place in the past. That doesn't mean you're ignoring it. It means that you acknowledged it. You put it in this place. Now it's time to move forward and build new memories, new connections, and you have to inject into the relationship new routines which are healthy, right? And all that is work. And at the end of the day, counseling is essential in this, in my estimation, because you need someone to be a coach, someone to hold you accountable to the ground rules, someone to remind you what it takes to move forward, someone to remind you about the restoration cycle. There has to be forgiveness. There has to be the restoration of trust. There has to be honesty. There has to be taking a responsibility, right? And all of that cycle revolves around being empathetic. In other words, putting myself in my partner's place. With that, we end. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.